Hey everyone, it's Heather, and today we're exploring the herps. Now, of all the animals of the world, the herps are probably one of the least understood. Of all the vertebrates in the world, the herps are probably the least known. In fact, your moms and dads that will be watching this later might not even know what a herp is either. So it's my job today to help break it down, introduce you to some of the coolest animals that we have here in Iowa, and help you understand what makes a herp truly special. In order to do this, we need to break it down into two smaller groups. Now, you heard me mention vertebrates earlier. What that means is a group of animals that has an inside backbone. That can be 5 different clubs. You got the mammals, that's us, the fish, the reptiles, the birds, and the amphibians. Now, the herps are a part of that club, but it takes 2 of those groups and brings them together. So I'm going to spend some time with you breaking down 2 different groups of animals, explaining what makes them different, but then at the very end, what makes them still the exact same. So I'm not going to mention herps again until the very end, and then you'll be able to tell me what a herp really is. We're going to start off by talking about the amphibians, and then we're going to end with the reptiles. An amphibian, if you've heard of them before, probably pops into your head. A frog, a toad, maybe a salamander, but most people think of frogs when they think of amphibians. What makes an amphibian different than all the other vertebrates is truly unique because they can do something that no other vertebrate can do. Let me introduce you to the American toad, one of the first amphibians I ever got to meet as a kid. Now, the toad is a type of frog, but there are things that make him different. The toad is just one of several amphibians we have here in Iowa. What makes amphibians special is not only what they feel like or what they look like, but mostly how they grow up. All amphibians have certain things in common. Their eyes are on top of their head. They need to have moist, wet skin. And they also, in Iowa, have very camouflaged skin. But not every amphibian's the same color because not every amphibian lives in the same place. A toad has great camouflage for the mud. He almost looks like a pile of mud when I put him on the ground. You'll notice he doesn't really have big webbed feet, not like his cousin the frog that has big swimming flippers. And that's because adult toads like this like to spend most of their time on land. When they go to the water, it's time to lay eggs. Those eggs are what makes amphibians different. They start off as slimy eggs. When they hatch out of their eggs, they still aren't done with their changing. They don't look like their adult form at all. When they hatch, they're called tadpoles. All amphibians, no matter what kind they are, start out as tadpoles. Little heads with swimming tails moving through the water, and then slowly but surely they metamorph or they change into their adult form. Only the amphibians can do this in the vertebrate group. And because of that unique life cycle, they're in their own club. But not all amphibians look like a toad. Not all amphibians have hopping feet, have short little squat bodies. Some amphibians look more like a reptile. So let's bring out another one and compare it to the toad. Let me introduce the tiger salamander, the largest salamander in North America. And it is also an amphibian. Its legs don't look the same. It has a gigantic tail and it can't hop anywhere. But there's certain things about it that make it part of the amphibian group. Its eyes are on top of its head, and it lives in the same habitat that the toad does. So you'll notice it has a lot of the same colors the toad does. And it has wet, slimy skin, and even though this doesn't look anything like a frog, it starts its life out as a tadpole also. But because these 2 animals are in the same group, it doesn't mean that they're the exact same. 2 different animals, 2 different looks, but they belong to the same animal club. Amphibians are some of the most amazing animals we have in Iowa, but they're only half of the herps. Amphibians are the magicians, the ones that transform from a water animal to a land animal. But again, they're only half of the herps. Now, let's take some time to explore the reptiles. So what's a reptile? Well, this is the perfect animal to help you figure that out. Meet the ornate box turtle, a very rare species in Iowa indeed. Full grown, this is what size she is. And she is a reptile. Notice some of the differences between amphibians and reptiles. Her eyes are on the side of her head rather than on top. She's not wet or slimy. In fact, she's covered in these hard protective scales. Even her shell is covered in scales. A turtle shell is actually rock hard bone, covered in thin scales, almost like a fingernail, made out of the same stuff. A turtle is not an amphibian because a turtle does not go through metamorphosis. When this little turtle was born, on her hatch day, she did come out of an egg, but it was not in the water. On her hatch day, she came out of an egg on land. And if you look closely at the turtle in this picture, you can already see the shell and all of the grown-up turtle parts. Reptiles do not go through metamorphosis. Another big difference between reptiles and amphibians is, again, all the different shapes and sizes they come in. Turtles are very, turtly. They have sharp beaks and hard shells and tough claws, perfect adaptations for where they live. Looking at this turtle, you can see that she doesn't have webbed toes at all. And that's because she's a land turtle. She doesn't like to spend any time in the water. It's not where she likes to spend her day. But if we look at another reptile, maybe we can just figure out what makes all reptiles the same. Meet the corn snake, another amazing reptile, but not one you're likely to find in your backyard. Corn snakes aren't normally found in Iowa. This corn snake was given to Story County Conservation as a pet that needed a good home. But even though this animal's a pet, it's still an awesome reptile. Doesn't look anything like a turtle though. No legs, no shell, but it still has some of those characteristics. It has its body covered in smooth, hard scales, its eyes on the side of its face, and just like the turtle, on this animal's hatch day, it looked like a little grown-up, an egg laid on land. We need to make sure to be careful with these reptile animals as well as the amphibians because we want to make sure that they stay a good temperature. One thing that makes all the animals we're exploring today the same is the fact that they're cold-blooded, or what naturalists like to call ectotherms. Ectotherms are animals that can't keep their body temperature the same. If you were to take that thermometer that you've been using a lot lately, you'd never know what you'd get with an ectotherm. If it's hot outside, they're hot on the inside. If it's cold outside, well, they're cold on the inside. Ectotherms are quite phenomenal at survival. Most of the ones in Iowa go through something called hibernation. I kind of feel like I was hibernating earlier this year. So what makes snakes and turtles and toads and salamanders all the same? Well, let's compare them one more time. Let me introduce you to the herps, reptiles and amphibians in the same animal club. But I just spent so much time helping you explore what makes them totally different. Metamorphosis, water eggs, scales, land eggs. But there are two things that they do have in common, two things that truly make them herps. One I just said. They both come from eggs. Just because one's on land and one's in the water, they're both egg layers. But what makes them different than birds? Well, that's easy. They're both ectotherms. Neither of these animals would enjoy the snow. A cold-blooded egg layer. Those are the herps. And together they make one of the coolest groups of animals in Iowa. And they live right in your backyard. They live right in your city park. They live right in the creek near your house. So go outside, find a herp, see what it does. See if it's a hopper or a slitherer. See if it eats bugs and worms or mice and other big things. If you find a herp, don't be afraid. They're animals just like you and me. If you find a herp, just enjoy the fact that you're sharing your space with it. So I hope the next time you see a cold-blooded egg layer, you think of this. You think of that funny new word and yell out, "I found a herp!"